Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Hello, I'm Lawrence Hoff. I write about the Fediverse, and well, I have a newsletter for Fediverse report. Let's do this on full screen. If I can find the options. You know what? Whatever. Oh yeah, slideshow. There we go. And I've been fascinated with the Fediverse for over a year and a half now, and I figured like it's super important to document what's happening there, because the Fediverse is really about decentralized technologies, and one of the super fun facts about decentralized technologies is that it gets really hard to get a clear overview of what's happening. That's both the upside and the downside of decentralization, is that you find new information, like there's no centralized place where things are happening. That's great for development. That's not necessarily great for the spread of information. So that's really why I started to document with a weekly newsletter of like trying to get an overview of what's happening everywhere in the Fediverse. Because like people know about Mastodon maybe, but there's so much more happening. So actually, let's first, a quick question of hands. Like who's familiar with, let's start Mastodon. Most of the people, not everybody yet. Who's familiar with other technologies on the Fediverse? Like maybe Lemmy, PeerTube, PixelFed? Still quite a few people, still definitely some people not raising their hands. So that's going to be interesting. I'm going to go for a quick definition of what a Fediverse actually is. Very, very, very short history. Fediverse cultures, new and current actors on the Fediverse, new entrants, and new areas of the Fediverse appearing. For defining the Fediverse, really, let's start with the very old school definition of grabbing something from Wikipedia. It's a collection of social networking services that communicate with each other using a common protocol. That's the official. There's not really no official definition. That's sort of the official definition. But really, what you see when people usually, in like colloquial terms, talk about the Fediverse, you get really more of a standing. It's specifically about ActivityPub protocol, people like the protocol that Mastodon uses, for example. Like we'll get later in talks with the next talk by Matthew about Matrix, which is also about the Fediverse, which uses the Matrix protocol. But like there is a group of people who will use the term Fediverse exclusively to refer to ActivityPub. That's not wrong, that's not right, like there's no wrong thing here, just pointing it out there, like that might generate confusion if you don't realize that people might use the term differently. Really, this is like the famous idea of the Fediverse. This picture is maybe slightly outdated, but it really signals that like for the main common protocol, the mostly used protocol ActivityPub, you actually have Mastodon. Wait, where is Mastodon? Somewhere. Mastodon on the top for like the social networking part, but there's a lot more happening, like music, books, writing, whatever. And honestly, I find that part of the most interesting parts of the Fediverse. Actually, probably even more than the microblogging Mastodon style. So I'll definitely go over that later on as well. A super, super short history. I think it's helpful to determine like roughly 4 phases of the Fediverse. Like, let's go back for 1 second, because I think I wanted to make a quick reference to like the earlier talk. Everybody was at the earlier keynote, right? Where the speaker said, hey, when you get a new technology, it usually imitates the old technology first. Like he showed a picture of the car that like first was imitated on a horse-drawn carriage. It's very much a process that we see in the Fediverse as well, and I think it's helpful to distinguish between these between different phases within the Fediverse, because you see technology developing. You see that first start of like, hey, we're in the imitation phase, and now we're starting to see new understandings that aren't just really a literal imitation of like Twitter, but with ActivityPub, but new ideas. But first, like super, super short history from like this process has been going on for a while. Like we had on the early 2010s, maybe even earlier, depending on your count, 2017, what they call the proto-Fediverse. Like people has been in this space building on various decentralized technologies. Not really necessarily ActivityPub, but trying to build like with open source, with decentralized social networks. Then we got, in 2017, we got ActivityPub. It got standardized by, sorry, I keep talking about ActivityPub. Can I get a quick raise of hands? Do people know what ActivityPub is? Okay, half, roughly, good. Sorry, I should have introduced that. ActivityPub is the protocol. It's formalized by the W3C, so it's an official web protocol that's used to exchange information. It's completely open source, it's completely decentralized, and it's used to build social communities and social networks. So it's really the most well-known of the decentralized protocols. You have many that are used for like the new generation of social networks, Mastodon being the most important part that Threads uses now as well. We'll get into that later. So in 2017, the W3C formalized the ActivityPub protocol, and people started building on it. And that was until November 22. And that was really the moment where you really saw what was in the earlier presentation of like the imitation of what came before. People started building Mastodon, and Mastodon was really Twitter, but with a different protocol. Twitter, but open source, was Mastodon. So really the imitation. You got PixelFed, which is again like Instagram, but with the same, with a new protocol. You got Lemmy, which is Reddit, but with the activity protocol. So really you get the idea of internet technologies that exist, just slightly different. We're building what we know just with a new protocol. Then November 22 happened, and that was when Elon Musk officially bought Twitter, and that was, well, to say the least, a watershed big upheaval moment in just the state of the internet at large. And already, even at that point, people weren't particularly happy with Elon Musk, and we saw the first wave of a Twitter migration. This was when really Mastodon got like way more social awareness, global awareness of like the idea of like, hey, Twitter doesn't have to be the only global town square, other places can be that as well. And you saw like en masse like migrations to Mastodon. And that continued until late 2023, roughly. You saw every time like Elon Musk did something on Twitter, later on X, that people didn't like, you saw a wave of signups to other no-social networks. That process sort of died in the end of 2023, because at that point, everybody who wanted to leave Twitter, like, sort of left already. So nobody really, like, everybody who's staying there wanted to stay there, so that process is over. That really did change the Fediverse, though, because, like, we'll get back to that later on a little bit, talking about cultures. Like, you can never really fully separate an open source technology from an open source the culture that's part of it. So suddenly we have a lot of, like, it used to be a culture of people who wanted to just build new things, like experiment, like the builders, the creatives, the technologists that want to do their own thing, and then suddenly a huge new group of people that had very different visions that were like, I just want Twitter just without the Elon Musk part. That created a culture clash. We'll come back to that later. And now, like early 2024, we start to get into a new phase yet again of the Fediverse, where you start to see current like internet platforms to feel like, hey, this ActivityPub, that's actually kind of cool. We can integrate it with our own existing platforms. So you have like, the biggest one is Meta's Threads. Like their Twitter competitor is working on integration with ActivityPub, working on integration with the Fediverse, which is by far the craziest massive thing you can think of. But also smaller organizations like Flipboard, like that's been around for over 12, 15 years, something like that. And they realized like, hey, this is for us a place of like, if we integrate with the Fediverse, we can also extend our social graph. This is awesome. Why don't we do that? Same with Ghost, the newsletter publisher. Get to it later. So really, like, what I'm trying to get here with this history, like, you can forget the history part, but maybe, like, the most important part is to get back to the previous presentation. When new technologies arrive, they first imitate what's already there, and then later on, they really develop it into their own thing, and that's sort of what we start to see happen now. Oh, I actually had a slide for this. Perfect. So already said, building on ActivityPub happens, it becomes an official specification, native Fediverse platforms get built. I really should have realized I had slides for this. Perfect. The current state and culture. The current state is like really microblogging. We're in the, what do people know Fediverse for? Mastodon, really. And what is Mastodon? It's microblogging. I hate the term microblogging, but it is the good term to refer to. It's what you do on Twitter, it's what you do on Threads. It's actually also pretty much at this point also what you do on Instagram. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's still small. Like we're roughly 1 million monthly active users. So this is not big, not big at all. This is still very much an upcoming new technology. And interestingly enough, Threads, you are familiar with Threads, the Meta's microblogging platform? Perfect, yeah. They're both a small and a big player. They're integrating now with the Fediverse, meaning you can connect your Threads platform to Mastodon. It's an opt-in process, so they're both a very big player because, well, obviously they're backed by Meta, one of the biggest company in the world, so it's a very big player, but not actually that many people have opted into doing that yet. So it's under 10K total. They don't release the official numbers, but order of magnitude, definitely less than 10K. Fediverse cultures is really one of the interesting things to me as well, because I think most of the people here at GOSIM enjoy the technology part, the building on new protocol, the new platforms, the new products that you can build on it. But there's also really you cannot separate that from the cultures that are present, especially in social networks. And what you see in the Fediverse is really that it got started really with people who are already fed up with big tech. So, well, the anti-big tech modus that was already present. As soon as 2017 already, that was already when people started leaving. Look, I don't really enjoy Twitter, I don't enjoy Facebook, whatever, big platform, bad. We'll build our own thing. The second part is not always as obvious to people, but it developed for a variety of reasons that are just, sometimes things just happen. It developed a culture of opt-in consent, which is really cool and also pretty unique and also sometimes confusing for new techies that come to the network that start to build things. Because when you had Twitter, you used to have the open API, all public data, you can scrape it, you do it whatever you want. Awesome. This is great if you're a developer, great if you're a researcher, awesome. But what happened is if you say to people, you can build your own social network, if you run your own Mastodon server, it's yours. You're in control. You're the owner. It's your data. And people, this is the selling point of why would you build decentralized social networks? You would build decentralized social networks because it means you get to be the owner. It's your part of the internet, it's yours. And that started, that's great. But that started to clash with this idea of hey, this is my data. I don't feel super comfortable with the idea of somebody's gonna build a scraper and just eat the entire fire hose of everything that's building on the Fediverse. It makes sense. But it's a mindset shift, and it's really hard to coordinate this thinking in a decentralized social network where people do not have the overview of hey, maybe I don't want to have my data scraped in whatever random database that people are just hacking together on a Saturday afternoon. That's been one of the main issues, struggles with the Fediverse, that it created its own unique space, but it's not always as welcoming to developers as people would like. Because there's this distrust of, oh, there's going to be another tech bro that just going to scrape all my data. And people get to be they don't always feel great about that. And that's sometimes made the Fediverse harder to grow when you need the developers to build new projects. And instead, sometimes they get pushed away. And that's the internal clash within the Fediverse that's been present for a long, long time. And we'll get back to that later when I talk more about like the current state and the future state of the Fediverse. Let's see, yep, all good. Fediverse native players, like Mastodon, most people know. Mastodon is microblogging, Mastodon is Twitter. Mastodon's been around for like since 2017. It's the OG. It's when, if you think like, hey, building social networks on an open, decentralized protocol is cool, most people start with Mastodon. I would recommend you start with Mastodon. Actually, let's check. How many people do have a Mastodon account? Perfect, halfway. Nice. I would recommend you start with Mastodon, because Mastodon is just where the action is. It's where the cool things are happening. It's by far the biggest, it's the most developed platform. But there's other parts of it as well, which I think a lot of people don't actually know about, but are just as cool. There's PeerTube. How many people do know PeerTube? Same people, nice. A very small group. It's a decentralized video hosting platform, like that gives you full control over, I host my videos, they're mine. It's a YouTube competitor, considering, well, not surprising considering the name. But again, it's interoperable with ActivityPub, meaning you can, if you're on your Mastodon account, you can follow people on PeerTube directly. You can comment on the PeerTube directly, you can like directly with your Mastodon account. They've been going along for a long time. It's developed by a French organization, and here we start to see the magic and the struggles of what it means to build decentralized, really decentralized technologies. Because they are French people, I love French people, awesome. They speak French, and they tend to do their own thing. So I'm not surprised that like I only saw like 3 or 4 hands with PeerTube, because even though it's like a very refined, fully great platform, great technology that's available, it's been working for a long, long time. They're just doing their own thing. Like over there on the French side of the Fediverse, having a great time, while like the international speaking part of the Fediverse, and especially not even the international speaking, English speaking wider part of the internet, just has no idea what's going on. And that's going to be really the major theme of everything that I'm going to be talking about. Like there is a ton of really cool stuff happening that people just don't know about, because decentralized technology means decentralized flow of information. Decentralized flow of information means it's really hard to get an overview of what's happening. So there is a great YouTube competitor. Like you can be completely in control of your own platform, of your own videos. Nobody knows about it. Same with Lemmy. Lemmy is a Reddit clone, really Reddit fork, that's also based on ActivityPub. Again, complete interoperability. Like, I can post to Lemmy with my Mastodon account. I can follow new posts on Lemmy with my Mastodon account. So it's like reading Reddit with your Twitter account and commenting, and vice versa. They've been around for also like, I think 4 or 5 years. It's one of the bigger platforms with like 200, 150 monthly, 1,000 monthly active users, which is feasible, not the biggest platform in the world like on the internet, but definitely healthy enough to sustain themselves. And there's PixelFed, which is like an Instagram competitor. And there's a lot more, but I think these are the 4 main ones. And what you see is they sort of do their own thing, and they do struggle with that switch that I referred to earlier, of like you build something that's really just, to sound a little bit negative, a clone of what came before. Like Mastodon is a Twitter clone with ActivityPub. PeerTube is a YouTube clone with ActivityPub. Lemmy is a Reddit clone with ActivityPub. PixelFed is an Instagram with ActivityPub. Like, not to downplay it, great technologies, great platform, strongly recommended. But we're still in that, like, these Fediverse native players, they've been around since 2017, 2018, maybe 2019. They do not necessarily make that switch, nor do they want to make that switch of like, okay, how can we explore what the new things that being in a decentralized social network can bring. Like, they're mostly happy with building that product as as we currently understand it, adding some good, healthy features, making it nicer, making it easier to use, making it prettier. All great. But this is not like, this is where the innovation happened, like past tense. Like they're the original players that innovated with building a new version of the internet. They're the original players that building a new, like, they innovated the idea of like, you can build a decentralized open internet like that nobody controls, where everybody can join. And that's the innovation they contributed. There's not necessarily the next step of, hey, how can we make, what sort of crazy new features can we add to Mastodon that are like completely different from like what Twitter can do? Then we got the new players, and that's where I think it gets interesting. Threads is the main one. Like Threads is still like, again, it's completely just microblogging. It really didn't innovate on what Twitter came before. But it did innovate in one very important thing, which said already at the beginning, we're gonna federate, we're gonna integrate with ActivityPub, meaning like we're working on full interoperability between the rest of the Fediverse, between Mastodon, between etc., the entire rest of the platform, and our network. This is like halfway in process now, meaning like that you can follow Threads accounts with your Mastodon account, which is really cool. And one interesting thing that will, well, let's talk about it now actually. Like I want to talk a little bit with culture as well. You see that this idea of we want interoperability, we want being in control, we want to connect with people who host their own platform. It's a great idea, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here. But what's noticeable is about the audience that it reaches. Like, we're very used to the idea that new technologies and new platforms get adopted by younger people. Like, the cool teenagers, they're gonna be dancing on TikTok videos or whatever, and then later on the rest follows. I think that idea makes a whole lot of sense, but here in Threads it gets completely flipped. Like we're one of the first people who turned on Federation, who had their Threads account and said like, hey, I want to connect to the rest of the Fediverse. I want to connect to Mastodon. It was Joe Biden. It was Barack Obama. There were not the cool kids. It was like the presidents. And that is a very strange mindset shift that we haven't really seen before, of like, who is adapting a technology? We're used to thinking the young cool people, and now it's suddenly like the epitome of the status quo with like Biden and Obama. And I don't think people have really come to terms with that idea of like, hey, we're building a new network, but we're also really rethinking the idea of how does adoption of a network happen. So that's for, well, I'll come back to that later maybe. But for Flipboard's been around, it's also an interesting case. It's been around for like, it's an early internet platform. It's, I think from 2008 or something, maybe 2010. It's a magazine where you can, well, flip information in, you can browse through it, and you can share it. It's been around for a long time. It was very big in the earlier stages of the internet, like, but then it sort of, gradually it existed, but it didn't really capture the mind share that it used to. It just cruised along on the sidelines. And they decided like, hey, already like November 2022, they realized like, hey, this is actually for us a great opportunity. We're gonna fully adapt to the Fediverse. Like, we're gonna integrate completely. You can follow us, you can follow the magazines, you can follow all the curated parts that people do. You can follow it from anywhere on like your Mastodon account, your whatever account, so you can connect and just share. And I think like Flipboard was one of the very first that really realized like, why is the Fediverse important? Is because like it gives you a massive social graph that you can hook into. Like, if you're a business, if you're a company, if you're an internet platform, and you're not the biggest internet platform, you're doing fine. Like, you're cruising along, like, you make money, you don't make crazy amounts of money, but it's all going well. And you want to grow, suddenly like hooking into the Fediverse, assuming it's some sort of social product, social platform, it's like you get connection with currently already 1 million monthly active users, and then we haven't even started talking about what happens when threads joins. Like that suddenly becomes a very relevant thing for a company that's like doing fine, or maybe even companies that are struggling a little bit, of like, hey, this is a very easy sell. If you want more users, just connect to the Fediverse. Like, why wouldn't you do it at this point? I think Flipboard was one of the very first to realize that, and now we start to see more and more companies like realize that. Ghost is a open source newsletter publishing platform, competes with Substack, Button Down, for example. They realized, like, they made a major announcement like a few weeks ago, of like, hey, we're gonna completely integrate with ActivityPub, and we're gonna start a fight with Substack. Like, they're gonna build a complete, like, Substack is the email publishing platform. Substack publishes emails, allows you to send out emails, but it's also like a reader app. And Ghost realized, like, hey, we want to compete with Substack. We're also going to build a reader app. We're going to build it on ActivityPub. So we're going to take in all the ActivityPub, like all the stuff that gets published on Mastodon, gets published whatever, and also take that into it. So their Discourse is a forum. Discourse also realized this whole same part of like, hey, this is a great, like, we're doing fine. We're building forums. We're having a great time over here. But what if we want to grow? What we want more users? Like, adding to ActivityPub is great for us. Then we have the new users. Like, one of the ideas of like a Fediverse or ActivityPub is like somebody hosts a server. Anybody can join, like, you can set who can join the server, maybe everybody, maybe only it's for you, and you connect to all the other servers on the Fediverse. And that gives you sovereign control of what's happening in your part of the social network. And this is really why, when I talked about earlier, like, why are politicians suddenly interested in it instead of young people, is that politicians and governments are they understand that need of like, we need sovereign control of our own social media presence. Like, especially European governments, they're not too happy with the idea that like the American big tech platforms can control what they say on the internet, how they can reach their audience. Like, it's really a matter of who's in control, who got power. And governments, like, they can be slow, they can be not great at adapting technology, but governments do tend to understand the concept of power. And the idea of like having sovereign power over what you say on the internet, it's hugely appealing. So that's why we have like, the European government has like a Mastodon presence, the Dutch government, the German government, the Swiss government, some parts of the French government as well. Like, it's all pilot phases, they're all experimenting, they're all trying things out. But for them, the sell is very easy of like, I want to be in, like, as a government, you'd want nothing more than to be in complete own control of your social media presence. So that's why they're all experimenting mainly with Mastodon. Same with, like, to a lesser extent, public benefit organizations. Like, being on control is nice, and for them also it feels like, hey, we obviously have a social obligation beyond just making money and reaching the maximum amount of people. And then they don't feel comfortable with big tech platforms for whatever reason, so it becomes appealing for them to say like, hey, we're building our own server. What we're missing, like what I said earlier, not necessarily younger people. Younger people are like way more aware of like what are others doing, so they tend to stay at the big platforms because that's where all the others are. Yeah, I have a few more minutes. One of the interesting things as well that I find, like, that even people that are involved in the Fediverse don't really know much about, is the idea of like the new types of scenes, the new types of thinking and products that you can build with ActivityPub, with the Fediverse. Like, so far, I've been mainly talking, like, every time I mention Fediverse, I give the example of Mastodon. Like, That is because it's the biggest player, but more importantly, it's how people understand what the Fediverse is. Like the way they envision the network is really from a concept of microblogging, like sending out small messages to other people that you follow, and you read small messages by other people that you follow, and like you retweet them and you boost them and you like them and comment, reply, whatever. But there's a whole lot of other new types of ways that are being built that I find absolutely fascinating that people aren't really aware of yet. And I think the main one is podcasting. The people who built the original podcasting spec are working on like an updated version of the spec that very much include, like podcasting is built on RSS. And they are looking of how can we integrate ActivityPub into it? Like how can we fully decentralize the podcasting part even more so we can move away from the indexes that are run by Apple and by Spotify. And that gives you suddenly like social part of like social features to your podcasting. Like you can comment and you can share your podcast with your Fediverse account. And I think that's actually one of the easiest, like the most likely ways that the Fediverse will really grow and gain mass user appeal is with this, like people already like podcasts, people already often use a third-party podcasting app. They don't even have to know that they're using the Fediverse when they can use that app and like just comment and reply with a Fediverse account. It's all Fediverse underneath, it's ActivityPub underneath. You don't have to know that. Second part is forums with like NodeBB, a forum software, and Discourse, other forum software. They're all working on like how can we interoperate? How can we communicate, share between forum A and forum B? Honestly, I don't really know what that is going to look like, and that's why it's so interesting to me. Like, I grew up early 2000s, like forums were a very big part of how I used the internet. Forums just sort of disappeared after the big platforms, and I think they have now a potential to come back because they don't have to be isolated anymore. They can be connected in the parts that you want sometimes. I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you, everybody. You can like it was so nice to have like these preset slides, and it only gave me the option of like where my social accounts gave me option for GitHub, Mastodon, and Matrix, which, thank you, GOSIM, that's perfect. So you can follow me on Mastodon, like on Fediverse Report, or on my personal account, and thank you, everybody.
And a quick question, 1 more minute.
To host each other's, So all the independent hosts or servers, they only host their own data, or is there an incentive to host other service data as well? So that's really decentralized. Otherwise, only the protocol is decentralized, but the storage is centralized.
They host sorry. Yeah. Good question. Like, if you are a server that, like, I start a Mastodon server. Like, you host my data of my account on it, but I receive like messages and posts from like your Mastodon server. They do get stored on my Mastodon server, so data gets duplicated all over the network.
And is there an incentive structure to do that, or is it just goodwill?
Goodwill, really, like not even, well, also partially goodwill. Just really, this is how the protocol operates, and this is just how we do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Got interesting questions, actually. Like, I didn't really realize that you couldn't think of it from the perspective of goodwill, but no, just sort of how it happened. I saw another question.
Yes. So you mentioned that Fediverse is not actually tied to ActivityPub, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that the web is actually a Fediverse with HTTP and the HTML and a set of independent servers?
Depends a little, like, yes, maybe. I think you could make that argument. I'm not really sure if it would be helpful for understanding of it. Like that's why I try to go into it of like, sure, Matrix like is technically part of the Fediverse, but like at that point, especially in your case, just call it the web, because even though technically I think you're probably correct, but I'm not really sure if it helps people understand what it is more at that point.
Yeah, but what is a Fediverse then?
Yeah, Fediverse, I think for me, it's really more an idea about building decentralized social networks that just happen to mainly use ActivityPub currently.
Okay, would you call email a Fediverse?
No.
No.
I think you could totally make that point that it falls under the definition, though. Like, yeah.
Even if you consider mailing lists, for example.
Sorry, one more time?
Mailing lists. So.
Yeah. Mailing lists. Yeah. I think you could totally make that point, yeah.
So it's not a Fediverse.
It is, and I think, like, the definition, yeah. How people use it, how people use the term to communicate with each other, no. Probably, like, if you're going to include emails or email lists as part of the Fediverse, people are going to be confused. So, a little bit no. But technically, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question. I think we can have more discussion after this. Yeah. Lawrence will be around. Yeah. But thank you so much, Lawrence, for sharing your ideas.